The history of the Sith Wars, a deep dive into Star Wars' dark legacy. This is something that shaped the galaxy in ways few other stories can. The Sith Wars. Now, if you're like me, you've always been fascinated by the Sith, their history, their philosophy, and the sheer chaos they bring to the galaxy. These wars weren't just battles. They were defining moments that show us what the Jedi and the Sith are really made of. Let's cover everything from the 100-Year Darkness all the way to the Galactic Civil War. And as we go through this, you'll see just how much these events shaped the galaxy we know today as Star Wars. So let's start at the very beginning, with a war that wasn't just the start of the Sith, it was the beginning of their hatred for the Jedi. The 100-Year Darkness, 7,000 to 6,900 BBY, the birth of the Sith. Now, for those who don't know and are new here, BBY means Before Battle Yavin. In other words, before Episode 4. Now, this is where all of it begins. 7,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Jedi Order wasn't the unified, disciplined group we think of today. Back then, there was really a division, a philosophical split about what the Force really was and how it should be used. A group of Jedi believed that the Force had far more potential than the Order was willing to admit. They experimented with dark side techniques, using alchemy to create horrifying monsters and weapons of war. These dark Jedi saw themselves as pioneers, but to the Jedi Council, they were heretics. Eventually, these tensions exploded into war. The 100-Year Darkness was brutal, a war fought not just with lightsabers, but with unnatural creations like the Leviathans, massive creatures that could absorb the life essence of their enemies. Despite their power, the Dark Jedi were defeated, but instead of executing them, the Jedi chose exile, a decision that would have consequences far beyond anything they could have imagined. The exiles wandered the galaxy until they stumbled upon Korriban, home of the Sith species. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The Sith weren't just some random alien race. They were deeply connected to the dark side. When the exiled Jedi arrived, they saw an opportunity. They enslaved the Sith, declared themselves gods, and merged their dark side practices with Sith culture. This was the birth of the Sith Order. From this moment on, the Sith would carry a deep hatred for the Jedi. And honestly, you can kind of see why. To the Sith, the Jedi weren't just their enemies. They were the ones who cast them out, who rejected their vision of what the Force could be. Fast forward 2,000 years, 5,000 BBY, the first galactic invasion, the Great Hyperspace War. Now, I can make a video covering each one of these wars in great detail. But the point of this video is to kind of gloss over each one of them so you get a general understanding. So 2,000 years later, 5,000 BBY, the Sith Empire has grown in isolation. They've built an empire on Korriban and Ziost, thriving in the shadows. But in 5,000 BBY, that isolation came to an end. This all started with Gav and Jory Daragon, two Republic explorers who accidentally stumbled upon Sith space while charting new hyperspace routes. Now, you'd think the Sith might have just killed them on sight, but Nagasato, one of the Sith Lords, saw an opportunity. He used the Daragons to spark a war, staging an attack to make it look like the Republic had struck first. The Sith invasion that followed was devastating. Entire planets fell under their usual assault. And for a while, it seemed like the Republic might not survive. But the Sith, as always, were their own worst enemy. Rivalries and betrayals among their leaders weakened their efforts. The Republic rallied and struck back, defeating the Sith at the Battle of Koros Major. Nagasato fled to Yavin 4, where he built massive temples and trained followers in secret. Even in defeat, the Sith left their mark, temples, artifacts, and the lingering fear of their return. Now, the Great Sith War is where things start to feel personal. This is 3,996 to 3,986 BBY, the rise of Exar Kun. This wasn't just a war between the Jedi and the Sith, it was a war born from betrayal within the Jedi Order itself. Exar Kun was a brilliant Jedi Knight, but his ambition got the better of him. Obsessed with ancient Sith knowledge, Kun traveled to Korriban and Yavin 4, where he embraced the dark side. He wasn't alone in this. Ulic Qel-Droma, another Jedi, fell to the dark side after a series of personal tragedies. Together, they declared themselves the new Sith Lords. Their campaign against the Republic and the Jedi was devastating. Using Sith sorcery, Kun corrupted Jedi across the galaxy, turning them against their comrades. One of the most infamous moments of this war was the attack on Ossus, the Jedi's center of knowledge. Kun used Sith rituals to drain the life essence of captured Jedi, fueling his power. The devastation was so great that much of the Jedi's knowledge was lost, but in the end, the Sith were defeated. Ulic was captured and, in a moment of regret, renounced the dark side. Kun, on the other hand, bound his spirit to the temples of Yavin 4, ensuring that his legacy would haunt the galaxy for generations. Now, if we fast forward a little more, 3959 to 3956 BBY, Revan and Malak's timeline begins. This is one of the most iconic conflicts in Star Wars history, and it all started with the Mandalorian Wars. Revan and Malak, two Jedi Knights, defied the Jedi Council's orders and led the fight against the Mandalorians. But the war changed them. During their campaign, they discovered the Star Forge, an ancient Sith superweapon capable of creating fleets and armies. The dark side corrupted them, and when they returned, it wasn't as heroes. It was as Sith Lords. Revan and Malak's war against the Republic was brutal. Using the Star Forge, they built a massive fleet and turned countless Jedi to the dark side. But Revan's story took a surprising turn. He was captured by the Jedi, who wiped his memory and gave him a second chance. Revan rediscovered his identity and ultimately defeated Malak, destroying the Star Forge. His redemption became a symbol of hope, but the war left the Republic scarred and the Jedi Order fractured. Going even further, we get to the new Sith Wars in 2000 to 1000 BBY. This was the longest war by far. This was a 1,000 years war, and the new Sith Wars were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. This wasn't just a single war, it was a millennium of conflict that nearly destroyed both the Republic and the Jedi Order. And it all began with Darth Ruin, a former Jedi who reignited the Sith. Over the centuries, the Sith launched wave after wave of attacks, each more devastating than the last. The Republic was pushed to the brink, and for a while, it seemed like the Sith might actually win. The turning point came at the Battle of Ruusan. The Sith, consumed by infighting, were finally defeated. This is where Darth Bane comes into the picture. Recognizing the flaws in the Sith structure, Bane established the rule of two: one master, one apprentice. This allowed the Sith to survive in secrecy, slowly rebuilding their strength while the galaxy believed they were gone. So, what do all these wars tell us? The Sith are defined by their ambition and their capacity for destruction, but they're also defined by their own weakness, betrayal, infighting, and the instability of the dark side. The Sith Wars shaped the galaxy in profound ways, and their legacy can still be felt. They remind us of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the cost of power. But more than that, they show us the resilience of the Jedi and the struggle between light and dark. And that's what makes Star Wars so powerful. It's not just about battles or lightsabers of the Force, it's about the choices that we make, the paths we follow, and the belief that no matter how dark things get, there's always hope. There's always the choice to change for the better. I'd love to go into detail about every single one of these wars. Let me know if that's something you want to see, and I'll make it happen. Thank you again so much for watching today's video, and I will see you all in the next one, my fellow Jedi and Sith friends. Until next time, remember, the Force will be with you, always.